Welcome to the Drop the Mic Wrestling Podcast on Boom Broadcasting right here, the YouTube channel. We've had an epic start to the month of July, our first month ever as a YouTube platform. You know, we're the home of so many wrestling podcasts. We're the home of sports shows. I host a sports show in the evenings, Out of Pocket with Michael Davis. But we have a very special treat on the Drop the Mic Wrestling Podcast. And this is July 24th, and you should be watching Drop the Mic. But I know what you should be watching on August 8th, PBS, 10 p.m. When Giants Walked Here. I have the two masterminds behind this documentary, and I'm so excited to introduce Cliff Bumgardner and Chris Lee to the Drop the Mic Wrestling Podcast. Guys, I want to get into the documentary, but I mean, this is a wrestling podcast. You guys have been a tag team for this entire project. I want to know how y'all got your tag team together with this documentary. Cliff, this is your first time on Drop the Mic, period. I'll ask you first.
Yeah, so Chris and I both, Chris currently is a sportscaster for sports anchor rather for WRAL. I used to work at WRAL kind of in their doc and audience development division back in the day. We never really crossed over that much because Chris started right at the beginning of the pandemic a few years ago. Everybody was home, so we weren't even in the same building. But even when you work in a place with several hundred employees, when another wrestling fan starts, people tell you about it. So I knew about Chris and I knew about Chris's background long before we met. And when I first had the idea to do this doc, he was one of the first people I reached out to, and honestly kind of expecting like maybe he'll do an interview with me. Maybe he'll reach out to somebody for me. So I don't know. Could not have imagined that he'd jump in and become the other half of this project. And more importantly, that we'd become great friends along the way. So it's funny that you say we have truly become a tag team in the process of doing this, and not just this film, but hopefully more to come.
Well, I'm excited for the documentary to release. And Chris, I kind of have a similar story to Cliff, and you and I have talked about this off air before of like, you know, I used to watch Chris when I was growing up, and I remember your comment. You're like, man, why you got age me like that?
It's weird to hear it like that because, you know, you don't see yourself as old enough to have somebody say, I used to watch you growing up. So, I mean, no, I appreciate it. And it's funny because when I started at WXI, you're referring to my time at WXI. When I started at WXI, I went to Cameron Kent and Wanda Stark and said, I used to watch you growing up. And they had the same reaction. And then like literally 13 years later to have somebody else say that about my time at WXI is kind of like, okay, I get where they were at with that.
Man, that is so funny because, yeah, I've told you this off air, but like, I mean, growing up, you know, right before you get, you know, drugged to school and, you know, get started with your day, like, you know, mom would have WXII on. When I got home, she'd have WXII on. And she was like, hey, like, because I've been a wrestling fan all my life. And she's like, hey, you know that guy? He wrestles. I'm like, really? Why is he on the news all the time? And you obviously did some independent wrestling work. But this documentary, guys, is awesome. And of course, you know, probably showing my age, I didn't grow up on the Jim Crockett Promotions, never traveled to Dorton Arena to like watch a wrestling show. And so you guys are, you know, going for an audience who may be in the same shoes as I am in terms of like never getting to experience it. But you guys have the role of, hey, this is how everything went down and trying to give them that story. Why was it so important? And Cliff, that you being the brainchild and reaching out to Chris, what was so important about, you know, covering Jim Crockett Promotions and covering Dorton Arena in general versus literally anything else in the wrestling world?
Well, I'm actually in kind of a similar boat as you in that
Me too. I'm in the same boat.
Yeah, by the time I was around and old enough to go to wrestling shows, there were no wrestling shows at Dorton. So I grew up in Raleigh, I'm a Raleigh kid, and growing up here, going to the fairgrounds, which is where Dorton is, I'd see the building. It was always, I mean, it's for folks who don't know, have never seen it, Google a picture of Dorton Arena because it's this amazing rocket ship looking roller coaster building. It's wild. You can't miss it. And when I was growing up, my dad would always tell me there used to be wrestling there. and because I loved wrestling, but it wasn't something that I could go see myself. And I grew up with that in the back of my mind. Thankfully, starting in 2016, wrestling shows came back to Dorton, and I did get to go at that point to some independent wrestling shows in 2017. And it just kind of stuck in my mind of, wait a minute, why was this gone? Well, why is there that used to? Why is that phrase in the story? And I started to do a little bit of cursory research and just found that, our film is about Dorton Arena and it's about wrestling in Dorton Arena. But when you look at that history, you look at Dorton's history, you can kind of map the history of territory wrestling onto it and what was happening when the territories boom in the late 70s into the early and mid 80s. And then when things start to go away, it's the same story as what was going on in Dorton. So Dorton kind of became a lens for telling that story, telling a regional story, a piece of North Carolina history and local history, personal history for me growing up here. But bigger than that, showing an entire era of professional wrestling and getting to see kind of this, it's like the small story about the big thing of what territory wrestling going away meant to those communities. And Dorton was just kind of a perfect, really uncovered part of that history.
Now, real quick before I ask Chris, I gotta ask, like, do you remember your first ever wrestling show? Was it at Dorton or was it somewhere else?
Oh, for me?
Yeah.
My first live wrestling show would have been a Raw tape or a live Raw at the Crown Coliseum in Fayetteville. That's where it was. Because at the time they didn't run PNC as the arena here in Raleigh. It was called the RBC Center back then. They didn't run that building super often that I can remember. And so my mom actually drove me to Fayetteville to which is about an hour and a half from where we lived to go to wrestling shows. So Dorton wasn't an option at that point, and everything was on television. So you had to go to one of the giant NBA arenas to see it. But that was my first, was Fayetteville.
Wow. And I have a very interesting story about my first one. In doing this documentary, I found some stuff out. So my first wrestling events, I'm older than Cliff. I'm 38. I was 7 years old, 1993, LJVM Coliseum NX, the small building next to the LJVM Coliseum.
Wow.
Where the hockey team currently plays. They're the Carolina Thunderbirds. That's where I first saw wrestling. And that was 1993. And as I was going back, looking at, certain things about Dorton Arena, I noticed that my first wrestling events happened the day before the last wrestling events that happened in Dorton. So WCW would go from Winston-Salem to Dorton. I went to one in March of 93, which I would have been actually 6 at that time. And then April of 93, which I had been 7 by then because my birthday's in April. And
happy birthday.
Then in April. Yeah. And so then I would, I noticed like the next days, WCW was in Dorton Arena for some of those final events that were held there. So that's my like small connection to this. But just like Cliff, like my dad grew up talking about going to wrestling at Dorton Arena. He grew up in Yanceyville, North Carolina. So he was kind of like in the middle of Greensboro and in Raleigh. So when big events would happen, his dad would take him to Dorton. They'd take him to the Greensboro Coliseum. It was a happy middle for him. And, I grew up hearing those stories as well. So when Cliff reached out to me and wanted to asked me to be a part of this, I wanted to learn a little bit more about it myself because I knew the history of wrestling at WRAL. It used to be in the territories days. Jim Crockett Promotions would tape their TV show at WRAL. There was 3 TV stations they tape at: Fox 8 in High Point, WRAL in Raleigh, and also WBTV.
WBTV.
Yeah.
I think in Charlotte. I believe that's it. It's either that one or WSOC. But wanted to kind of connect with that while I was there. And Cliff sent me that email. It felt like a godsend at that point.
Wow. Dude, that is awesome, especially with Cliff just being like, hey, maybe he does something, maybe not. And just the way that you guys have meshed together for this project, like your own tag team. I don't know if you guys are going to make any custom championship belts for each other.
We got to think of a team name too. That's got to be in the works now.
Well, CNC Wrestling Factory was taken by Cedric Alexander and Caprice Coleman, so that's out of the running.
Yeah.
That's good though. That is really good.
Yeah.
What we'll have people drop in the comments what your tag team name should be, and we'll see what the people say. But obviously there's so many legendary names. For people who don't know, Ric Flair, Dusty Rhodes, Magnum TA have all wrestled in Dorton Arena for Jim Crockett Promotions. Like that is a historic arena. Just the boots that were laced to go in the ring and perform for people. And that's why we're wrestling fans, is like people putting their bodies on the line to just go out and entertain the people who pay a ticket. Or, nowadays, hey, Monday's on, let's watch Raw, or, Wednesday Dynamite, Friday SmackDown, so on and so forth. It's you have so many people who are a part of this history, but you only had to narrow it down to select a few people to be a part of the documentary and get to interview. What was y'all's selection process when it comes to, okay, who do we interview? Who will say yes? And going about the various avenues to get them to actually agree to it.
Basically, who would say yes and who's available?
a lot of it was practicality. So we started this, even though Chris and I both do this for a living, this was very much a night weekend project. This was something extra we were doing for the love of the game, basically. So we didn't have a ton of resources to go travel. There was a lot of names on our list that would have been great, who were spread out throughout the country, that we would have loved to have talked to, but just didn't have the resources for that. On this one at that time. So a lot of it was who's in North Carolina, who's local, who can we get, or who's coming into town. We had some great relationships with wrestling promotions here, like AML, based in Winston-Salem. We were able to go to some of their shows and interview people who they had brought in, like Earl Hebner, who's in the film. But also a lot of it was we really did want, and anybody that we talked to, as much as we could, we wanted it to be people who had been there. We wanted it to be people who had experienced it. We wanted to keep the talking heads, quote unquote, as to a minimum if we could. So for the most part, you are going to see people who wrestled there, promoted shows there, were part of it. And we got a lot of legends, but we also have some kind of modern legends, people who got to go and perform in Dorton. You mentioned some of the great names who'd been there throughout the years, but when wrestling came back to Dorton in the mid 2010s, it created an opportunity for this whole other generation who grew up watching wrestling there, had gone all over the world, in some cases made great careers. Now they got to go wrestle in the building that they loved when they were kids. So to that end, we got C.W. Anderson, who's an ECW original, one of the Extreme Horsemen, and grew up watching shows in Dorton. Also, Shane Helms, probably best known as the Hurricane, who got to, from Raleigh, absolutely stand back. And we got to interview him and talk to him about his experience too. And then we had there were some people who did both, like Jimmy Valiant wrestled there back in the day and then got to come be a part of the revival shows, as a legend. So that was what we really hoped for, I think, and focused on, was as much as possible, let's keep it to people who walked those halls themselves. And we were really lucky to get to talk to some very wonderful people and who are a massive part of wrestling's history and present. Because Shane Helms, producer for WWE now, so people who are making wrestling happen on a daily basis, and we got to pick their brains for a while.
And when you mentioned Jimmy Valiant, and we were talking about our first wrestling shows, Jimmy Valiant, Boogie Woogie Man, was at my first ever wrestling show. It was January 2005, and the card was like Rock and Roll Express, Midnight Express, and the main event was Tully Blanchard versus Dusty Rhodes.
Oh wow,
coming back! Yeah, that's a good first show.
You said for 2005?
Yeah, so
wow, that's crazy. It's like a time machine show. That's awesome.
Yeah. No. And especially of course, they're past their prime at that point, but they can still go into a venue and put a show on for the fans, meet them. That's why I love shows like you mentioned AML here locally. I love going to the AML shows, love meeting stars of the past, present, future. But it would be so cool. It just knowing people who were in this documentary got to go back to the venue they like watched growing up. Like, I would love to go back to that venue in Lenoir, North Carolina, and have like a wrestling show. Like, I think that would be like so cool, like such a full circle moment that hopefully you guys provided with, you know, just them reflecting, like Shane Helms reflected on this documentary. Chris, did you have any stories in terms of like getting these people to, you know, as your words say yes?
You know, I don't think like we didn't have to like wring anybody's arm or anything like that to get anybody to do it. But I think part of it was just like my relationships back from when I was a wrestler, and you know, being able to, like, me and CW Anderson met at a WrestleCade for the first time. I can't remember which year, and then kind of stayed in contact, and then we eventually were booked against a match against one another, and it was one of the best matches of my career. It was in Asheboro, North Carolina, and we've been close since then. I think it was like one of those things where I was an unknown person, and he had a match with me, and it went very well. It was probably match of the night for that particular promotion, and you know, and you just kind of built that bond. Me and Shane Helms never been in the ring together, but we you know, have been shared locker rooms together. I'd helped him out at one of his Omega shows back where the Hardy Boys took on the Briscoe brothers, and that sold out a high school in Cameron, North Carolina.
Of course,
I got a chance to interview you know, both tag teams beforehand. And so, you know, and it's just like stuff like that. You have those great moments, and you built these relationships over time. So, you know, texting people and asking them to be a part of it was really helpful with that. But I think mostly the cool thing about it was, like, for me, reconnecting with wrestling, right? Because after I retired in early 2016, I hadn't really done much in wrestling since then. And then, you know, 2021, we get started on this thing, and production really starts in 2022. It was me getting back into it, really. And it's, you know, been kind of cool since then, because since then I've been able to do some wrestling commentary, and been in the ring rolling around a few times. So who knows, I might make a little bit of a comeback one day, but it was just cool for me to kind of reconnect with wrestling.
Now, what would be great is if, you know, if there was an in-ring comeback, you know, maybe have somebody who's done a documentary before kind of like follow you around with a camera and I don't know anybody who's like done a documentary though.
Where can we find that guy?
That would be so good. I would watch that too on PBS.
I don't know if PBS would buy a whole, you know, feature length thing about Chris Lee return to the ring.
You never know.
I don't know.
Maybe Channel 12 does it.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not there anymore, so I don't know. Maybe I don't know if they'd want to rehash that, but WRL might take it though.
Hey, I would want. Hey, whatever
take that for real.
Whatever network gets it, that would be awesome. It's challenging, but super fun to do commentary. I've done it for Squared Circle Champions here locally in the Wilkes County area. They've run 3 shows in Ferguson. They're running their 4th in September. Chris, I know you mentioned, you know, your commentary background. I know you're doing Ashe Wrestling commentary. How is it, you know, being back in that wrestling world, not only with the documentary, but with the commentary as well?
I love it, man. You know, I tell people, like, you know, there's a lot of people who joke and say I've lived so many different lives because, you know, I've been a print guy, I've been a radio guy, I've been a TV guy, I've wrestled, I've worked at Victoria's Secret, I've rapped and released albums, and, you know, I've done all these different things. And the 3 things that complete me are radio, television, and wrestling. And if I have a little bit of all of that involved in my life, then I feel complete. and that's where I was when you were watching me when you were growing up when I was at WXII, and that's kind of what's going on now. Like, you know, I'm affiliated with 99.9 The Fan in Raleigh, and we do Panthers podcast through them, and then of course television portion at WRL, and some play-by-play with CBS Sports, and Ashe Wrestling and now, being back into wrestling through documentary and commentary. I feel complete.
Man, that is awesome. Yeah, I'm all grown up. I got a little bit of facial.
Hey, you got more facial hair than me, man. Like I can't grow that much.
We're like a gradient. If you go this way on the screen, it's like it grows as we go.
That is the first time I've ever heard that in my life. So I will take it. Also, Victoria's Secret.
Yeah,
is that real?
Yeah. See, there's moments in your life where when you just have to make the ends meet. And there was a moment where I was employed, but then like hours were kind of taken away, and it really like took a check that was already low to something that was a lot lower. I was maybe 24 at the time. Maybe it was right before I started wrestling. And I was, working at this nightclub, and one of the girls that I was her boss, she was a manager at a Victoria's Secret. She says, well, we're hiring. We need some guys who can lift in the stock room. So I was like, all right. So she became my boss. And then women started seeing me there and asking my opinion on certain things, which was kind of cool. And so because of that, they decided to take me out of the stock room, put me on the floor. And, if people needed to get measured or anything, I didn't do that. But like women would actually, say like, hey, do you think this will be good for my husband or for my boyfriend? I learned how to put together their bra drawers. So like, I tell my wife, like, I can organize your bra drawer just like Victoria's Secret if you want me to. So I have that skill set. That is a little known skill set that I have. But yeah, it was a part of my life for about 9 months. So
wow.
Yeah.
The more you know, the more you find out on Drop the Mic. we just built Chris Lee's whole resume and the soft skills.
I can organize a bra drawer like Victoria's Secret.
Cliff, that's not my skill set. I don't know about you, but
No,
that's not
same. No, I was thinking like when you go into entertainment and television for a career, parents are often like, have something to fall back on. That's the best something to fall back on I've ever heard.
Oh man. Well, I'm glad you guys didn't have to fall back with plan B or plan C, so on and so forth. Just dropped a Seth Rollins and Austin Aries reference in the same sense, by the way. If you're a wrestling fan, you caught that. But what was the most challenging obstacle when it came to creating this documentary? Because I mean, I don't know how many like sleepless nights, how many hours in the day, but I mean, you're never going to have like an easy road with it.
Yeah, for sure. I would say there are two things that come to mind immediately when you say that. The first is just the amount of material there was to go through. We have in the film these wonderful photographs from Raleigh's News and Observer newspaper that they gave us the rights to use. Most of them have never been printed or seen before, and they are these incredible black and white, some color, but mostly black and white photographs from wrestling shows in Dorton, dating all the way back through the 80s. And that was just an incredible amount of material. Plus, you think about all the shows that have been there over the years and the research. It was just, we're going through 30 plus years of history to try to find a story that we could tell that has some sort of beginning, middle, and end. And you're at the end of the day, you're making a movie, right? You've got to have certain creative and technical considerations in place. So that took, the overall production process was about 2 to 2.5 years, and the archive and just the amount of material was a big part of it. From a production perspective, the thing we didn't anticipate that would be challenging was actually getting in the building. We filmed for almost 6 months before we were actually able to get access to the building.
No way.
And it's a long story, but the gist of it was that the building is for rent. To this day, it's a very famous building. It commands a high price. We, as mentioned, we're doing this as a passion project. We needed to film there for a few hours. They're not used to that. And so it was this real negotiation to try to figure out how we were actually going to get access into the building. Thankfully, FWE Wrestling, another great local promotion based out of Raleigh, allowed us to come in with one of their shows and not only film the building itself, which we got a lot of great footage, but we filmed an FWE show, and you'll see that in the film. So you'll actually see a show from late 2022 of a modern show in Dorton. So it's some nice contrast from the classic and the archive and everything that we had to actually see wrestling being back in the building and seeing, young stars, legends, everybody in between coming back to Dorton again. So that was a great opportunity, but it was a long road that we were not sure for a while if we were actually going to have footage of the building in the movie about the building, which was kind of daunting, but we got there in the end.
I think another thing too is also like there's a who's who of people who've said no to us. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so just getting people to be a part of it was a task as well. I mean, I used to be a wrestler, so I was able to get some certain people based off of my relationships. But there's certain people who didn't know me and didn't have that relationship with me. And then also there's the case of, this people straight up don't know of real documentaries for wrestling done outside of WWE and Vice.
Yeah.
Like this is kind of a different concept. I mean, of course there's been others, but as far as what people trust and what they'll say yes to, people have said yes to WWE, they've said yes to Vice. Here are these two guys who are, doing this thing, and it's just us. And so I think that was a little bit of a hurdle. So I think now that we have this and it's on PBS, I think this is makes it easier for maybe some future projects and things like that. So, but that was definitely one of the hurdles we had to go through.
Yeah. There was literally one interview in particular where when we showed up, I could tell that the person, and I won't out them just because they were very good to us, and so I don't want it to sound bad, but I could tell they were very hesitant at first and why did I agree to do this? And then they saw our cameras and our lights and saw that we had professional equipment and that we knew what we were doing. And I saw them go oh, because they were just expecting us to show up with a cell phone and be talk about wrestling, And so, we had to, with each person, sort of gain that trust and, let people know, no, we do this for a living. This is a passion project, but this is what we do. And we know what we're doing and we're legit in that way. And like Chris said, hopefully next time it makes it that much easier.
Because this is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is through Slug City Media. That's your baby, Cliff, right?
Close. Slug line.
I knew it as soon as I said it.
Yeah, Slugline Media is my company, and this is one of our first big kind of public projects. We've been a company for years doing work on the client side, but we are an original film and commercial production company. Have a number of things that are either announced or will be announced in the near future, and have some exciting stuff coming out on that front. But yeah, a lot of what I do is these days more and more original documentary, and that's kind of where I cut my teeth in the for-hire video side for many, many years, and now trying to push forward and do more stuff like this. So Chris and I have ideas. We have other projects that we're hoping to continue down that road, some wrestling related and some not. A lot of my background, I'm a huge wrestling fan, and that got me into this, but a lot of my background is in really storytelling about the American South. A lot of the complicated factors in that, racial factors, political factors, a lot of that kind of stuff. So it's actually funny for some people to hear that I did a wrestling documentary. And then after this, there's going to be people who see the next stuff and go, that's the Dorton guys. How is this all squared? But, at the end of the day, this is also Southern history. It's Southern culture. And I'm a Southern guy, and that always interests me. So hopefully we'll have a lot more to come very soon.
That's super cool, because that was kind of the idea behind Boom Broadcasting. Is Chris knows this. I did a lot of work with Desmond Johnson, Tobacco Road Sports Radio, but I wanted to do more than just sports, because I was doing sports, and I was doing wrestling. So I wanted to open an avenue to where hey, people who like sports and like wrestling, that's cool. But some of them like TV shows. There's somebody doing a TV show review. There's, somebody doing a show on comedic relief. There's somebody who's going to be doing a cooking show. starting this fall. Like just all of the different things. There's a show on Saturdays. I talk more about like personal obstacles and life in general, to where hopefully I can reach somebody through that. So it's awesome that you're not like honed into like one niche, because it doesn't limit your creativity.
For sure. And I think that all plays into, like you said, where we were talking about Southern storytelling, there's an old phrase that as goes the South, so goes the nation, right? There's a lot of things that happen here, are happening here, cultural things, sports, entertainment, you name it, that then have these massive ramifications everywhere. And so for those of us who are here, sometimes we get referred to as local filmmakers. And it's like, yes, we live here, but the stories go everywhere. So this film, for example, for anybody listening who's not in North Carolina, is going to be on the PBS app, which is a free app. You can download it right now. Have it ready. Oh, look at that. That was like
what a plug.
That was like a cooking show. Like, here's one I prepared earlier. And people can watch anywhere. So, you don't have to be a North Carolina person or just love North Carolina and North Carolina history to be interested in this film. Likewise, you don't have to be a wrestling fan to be interested in the film. We're kind of trying to straddle both of those worlds a little bit. So PBS app, August 8th. As soon as the movie is off on television, it'll be on the app.
That's an awesome plug, especially with the ring light in the back. What a guy. You even got a small glimpse into Chris's little studio right there. And it's awesome, like mentioning like people watching it outside of North Carolina, but people like in Raleigh get a treat, because August 6th there's like a live showing with a Q&A panel. I don't know if you guys want to drop who's going to be there, but you guys are going to be there, right? You two are confirmed being there August 6th.
We're there. CW Anderson will be there. He's a part of the panel. And for folks who are in the Raleigh area or who know anything about big time broadcasters in the state of North Carolina, David Crabtree, he was a longtime anchor at WRL. He recently retired, I think maybe 2 years ago, and he left to become the CEO over at PBS North Carolina. So that works out, right? And yeah, he'll be there moderating and everything. So it'll be a treat to have him there. I mean, he's a longtime broadcasting legend. I think was just inducted to the North Carolina Broadcasting Hall of Fame. He's gotten like the Order of the Longleaf Pine distinction from the governor. Like, this is somebody who's like, like legit. When it comes to North Carolina and broadcasting, like he's like one of the guys. So it's great to have him as a part of it as well, to moderate this. And Cliff and I are excited to talk to everybody. The tickets are free. The Rialto holds just over 400 people. We have over 300 seats that have already been taken. That is as of last week. So we haven't had the updated count. So you might want to go ahead and go to pbsnc.org to get your free ticket now, because there's probably 75 or less available right now as we're talking, and emphasis on the less, because we really don't know what the updated count is. PBS has that, but it's been exciting to see so many people excited about this. Like, I've stalked a few people's pages and seeing like, okay, so who's sharing this, and going through all that, and seeing people I don't know saying that they're excited about this, that they're going to be at the Rialto to watch this as well, has been really cool. And it feels like Cliff and I have kind of struck gold on something, and telling a piece of North Carolina history was a part of our culture here. It's part of our DNA. Before the Panthers, before the Hornets, before the Hurricanes, it was basically college basketball, NASCAR, and pro wrestling. That's what got everything growing in this area. And for NASCAR, well, you can count on 2 or 3 races a year between North Wilkesboro and Charlotte Motor Speedway. And then, college basketball, November to April. The rest of the year, every week, every Tuesday, they were at Dorton. There was other times during the week at Greensboro Coliseum, at Bojangles Arena in Charlotte, which had a different name back then. So, wrestling is a part of the lifeblood of North Carolina. We feel like it needs its proper. We need to tell the story in a proper way to show what the culture was like around it in the state of North Carolina, and we're doing that with a little glimpse with Dorton Arena.
So you think you struck gold on the silver screen, so to speak?
Exactly.
That is.
Exactly. And hopefully we can go platinum on the PBS app.
Oh, we'll edit the when we clip this on social media, we'll try to make your screen platinum for that little portion.
For sure.
What is the color platinum? Is it like more of a silver, or
It's called platinum, like platinum blonde, they say, right?
Yeah, it's platinum is like silver. I think it's just like smoother than silver, if that makes sense.
Man, some wrestler needs to take that. Like silver but smoother. Come on, that is like NXT waiting to happen.
I mean, I might be coming back, so hey, I am working on ideas. I might be working on ideas.
Cut that out. Cut that out. Sorry,
No. Yeah, no, that's free. Anybody can have it. I got plenty of ideas.
Cliff,
but
we got
if nobody takes it, I might have to stay.
we got to protect the character, but we also got to have like some B-roll for the documentary. Whoever follows Chris Lee around for his return to the ring.
Whoever does it, I don't know who.
And hey, if you return to the ring, I don't expect you commentating your own match. I would love the distinct honor. So if that could happen, that would be a dream of mine.
We'll see what happens. I've played around with the idea of taking breaks while I'm wrestling, because it has been since 2016, going back to put on the headset to explain to people what I just went through, taking off the headset and going back in. So I don't know. We'll see what happens with that.
we are cooking with all the ideas, all the brainstorming.
We got Grease right now, cooking with it.
Woo-hoo. Well, we're all wrestling fans. Super, super excited for you guys to release your work, and I'm sure it's going to be absolutely incredible to see, like, hey, it's over, but you can be proud of the work you've done, and hopefully, you just entertain and you let people enjoy this documentary. It releases August 8th, PBS, 10 p.m. That nice little advertisement from Chris Lee with the PBS app as well for those non-North Carolinians, the ones who aren't blessed with the best state in America. But we'll get into what's been happening in WWE, AEW, kind of like the current record and the current standings of things with our next guest on. He also hosts a podcast. I'll bring him here in a second. But Chris, before we get out of here, where can people find you? And then we'll see where Cliff can plug his stuff as well.
Absolutely. Chris Lee TV. My last name is spelled Lea. Got to add that TV because there's another Chris Lee who's a politician in Canada who has all the at Chris Lees. And so he's older than me. He got to it before I did. So at Chris Lee TV on Twitter, or formerly known as Twitter X, whatever, and Instagram. And those are the best ways to follow me and see what I'm up to.
So he's not talking Canadian politics, or he might be. Who knows?
Yeah, no, I'm not an openly gay politician who represents the Green Party in Canada. I'm not that guy, and he's white too. So I mean, there's a few different distinctions there. So, yeah.
so if you go to the Canadian border for the Chris Lee, you've went too far. You need.
But Chris Lee was the first openly gay politician in Canada, so Chris Lee's just make history wherever, So if your name is Chris Lee, cool. You're just gonna make history. So
I wasn't afraid. I was like, he's not some wacko, is he? That would be terrible to share an Instagram, to share a Twitter handle with some crazy, But no, he's Canada. Of course, he's cool.
I mean, depends who you ask. I mean, I'm a big How I Met Your Mother fan. If you ask Barney Stinson, that's a whole other story. Cliff, where can the people find you and all the stuff you're doing?
I am pretty easy to find. I'm at Cliff Bumgardner everywhere. My last name is spelled just the way it sounds. Remember, you're hooked on phonics. It's Bumgardner. And yeah, when you have a weird name, there aren't any other ones. So I have all the social media handles. You can follow me. I'm most active on Instagram, and that's where we're posting a lot of behind the scenes from the movie, photos from over the last couple of years, and also some sneak peeks at the stuff that we're doing now and that we'll hopefully be able to talk about in the coming months and years.
That's super awesome. And yeah, Michael Davis, one of a kind of name. So nobody confuses me for that. But my Instagram's at Drop the Mic Wrestling for the podcast, and then on X it's B_Michael Davis for those interested. But for my wrestling fans, obviously you're a wrestling fan if you're watching this right now. Stay tuned. We're going to talk what's happening in the television wrestling world, but please go support When Giants Walked Here. If you can't get to Raleigh, then you need to watch it on the PBS app.
Oh,
and
there it
there we
is.
go. All right, guys, we'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to the Drop the Mic Wrestling Podcast here on its exclusive home, Boom Broadcasting. Super thankful for Cliff and Chris hopping in to talk about their PBS documentary. Remember When Giants Walked Here. That releases on August 8th on PBS at 10 p.m. And if you're not local to the North Carolina region, you can look at it on the PBS app, just like Chris Lee showed you. But right now I'm super excited because he hosts Heated Shenanigans. His name is Scott, and we're here, as promised, talk about WWE and AEW, the latest happenings. And dude, I was shocked when I was like reading online about Bobby Lashley potentially being done with WWE. And I was like, wow, it didn't seem like so long ago Bobby Lashley was getting this thing going with the Street Profits, and okay, they're having this rivalry with the Vile Testament. And then like, okay, Bobby Lashley's not on screen, and now it's coming to my attention, Bobby Lashley might be done with WWE. What was your initial reaction to this?
I was disappointed. I really felt Bobby should have had a bigger send out for this second run. It's not really an argument. This second run has been much bigger than the first one that he had in WWE, and he was at a point where the Hurt Business didn't really work out, and then you get paired with the Street Profits. That's a big gap to leave in that group. That booking is going to need a little work. I was so excited when they came together, the Street Profits and Bobby, because in my opinion, at the end of this, it would have meant a very great deal for Montez Ford. He just has star written all over him, and I think it's a matter of time. And maybe this might be a blessing in disguise. Maybe Montez Ford's breakout might be expedited because of the departure of Bobby Lashley. But there's going to be rumblings of, what if Bobby goes to TNA? Did he really even leave WWE because of the partnership with TNA and WWE? He could go to AEW. That is also another option. Right earlier today, I saw that MVP had announced that, yeah, he's gone. He's done.
Wow. And that's there's so many things that could be like tied into this and Bobby Lashley leaving, but it definitely took me by surprise because I mean, you mentioned that original WWE stint. Like he walked in, he looked like, you know, this gigantic guy. He hasn't lost any of that size as he's gotten older. If anything, he's put even more muscle on. But he had that original run, you know, with WWE, CW. It was like, okay, I mean, if there was a bright spot of that, it's seeing the emergence of guys like Bobby Lashley. And then he left WWE, went TNA, also spent time in Bellator. And he was like a big part of TNA's program for several years. Feuds with Kurt Angle, feuds with Drew Galloway, you know, now known as Drew McIntyre. And then coming back to WWE, I'm like, okay, this is exactly how it was supposed to happen. Bobby Lashley went away, improved, you know, got some more experience under his belt, become a bigger star to come in WWE. And yeah, it just, he had a really good run in the COVID era, being WWE champion. I felt like Hurt Business, you mentioned, like they dropped the ball on that way too early, and everybody's wanted the Hurt Business to come back. And now, like, MVP's a free agent, like you said. Bobby Lashley leaving WWE. Shelton Benjamin was let go from WWE not too long ago. I mean, Cedric Alexander, like, what are you doing in NXT? Do you want to let your contract expire, get the Hurt Business back together in AEW? Would you like for AEW to capitalize on that opportunity?
I think that would be a very bad idea for AEW.
Really?
It is so difficult to talk about AEW because I want them to succeed. I have friends that work in AEW and I want them to continue to have jobs and do well. But there are glaring booking issues and mismanagement. And I don't know if bringing in a prominent WWE stable to utilize them for 2 weeks and then write them off of TV for whatever reason really helps anyone. Bobby Lashley is a bona fide star. He is a former multiple-time world champion. Shelton Benjamin, one of the most decorated, athletic, gifted professional wrestlers we have ever seen of our generation. You also have MVP, who is one of the best mouthpieces in a managerial role currently. And I think it would be a very good equation to square peg round hole. I don't think bringing them in collectively would do anything for the long run, which is one thing that I personally kind of had an issue with AEW is their popcorn style booking. They want to pop the rating for 1 or 2 shows, and then it seems to flatline. I'd like to see a little bit more consistent booking out of AEW to maintain the audience you're getting from those spike weeks. And again, respectfully, I do not think it would be a good marriage.
Yeah, that makes sense, and we'll dive into AEW with Blood and Guts because I'm in the same boat. I enjoy AEW. I love AEW. I'm glad it's around. People hating on AEW just because it's the cool thing to do on the internet. No, but just like WWE, there's stuff like, hey, we're guys on podcasts. We're going to say, hey, this is going really well, but hey, this area there's more to be desired. In that realm. And I feel like that's AEW Blood and Guts. That'll be tonight on Dynamite for AEW, but we'll touch on that before we get off for sure. But I mean, Bobby Lashley leaves a hole, from his runs in WWE and TNA. Street Profits, where do they go from here? Because I mean, Montez Ford to me and to you is a big star in the making, just has that charisma. And now they're actually in a gauntlet match this Friday to challenge the WWE Tag Team Champions DIY. You got the Street Profits, you got the Good Brothers, you got the Bloodlines, Tongaloa, if they're going by Gorillas of Destiny. You got Legado del Fantasma, you got Pretty Deadly, you got the wild card team thrown together of Apollo Crews and Baron Corbin. It looks like that's Baron's role is just getting thrown in with random guys for no reason whatsoever, even though his pairing with Braun Breaker really did work out in NXT. But there's our 6 teams. I don't know if DIY loses the titles necessarily early on in this run, but in terms of getting that title match and getting that spotlight, which of these tag teams need it more? Is it Street Profits because of what happened with Bobby Lashley?
I think you got a couple of ways you could go booking wise with this. You could stall for time, have them lose, then try to regroup, maybe enter another leader into the group, but that's going to feel really like you're blatantly replacing Bobby at that point, which they very well could do. You could go, I think it would be surprising to have them win. I would not be, I'm not saying that they don't deserve to win, but I don't think they're likely, especially if the any of the bloodline is in this match. I feel they're going to win. I personally speaking, and I have no inside knowledge, no hot dirt sheet news. This is just a gut feeling. Mm-hmm. It will not matter which of these teams win. Because if it is true and the Motor City Machine Guns are going to WWE, you would be very foolish to not immediately deliver a DIY Machine Guns match.
Really?
Again, I don't have any inside news that this is taking place. There's no reports that they have even signed with WWE. I just think that this is a nice little give the tag team something to do. Coming up later down the line, we're going to see the machine guns, possibly. But to answer the question of the gauntlet match, I think they'll have a good showing in the match with the other tag teams. I do not think that the Street Profits are going to win, which is unfortunate. I think we are very much in a world of all things Bloodline gets pushed to the moon, and I don't think this match will be any different.
You gotta throw your ones up in the sky for I don't know what Bloodline anymore, but we're still throwing up our ones.
I'm throwing up the one for the Tribal Chief. The Tribal Chief is where I'm at.
But who is the Tribal Chief?
Oh, it's Roman Reigns. It's Roman.
Dude, I've been saying for weeks on this podcast, I cannot wait for SummerSlam because, dude, I've called this summer pretty close to spot on as anyone can. With Solo, pinning Cody in that 6-man tag, going on to wrestle Cody at SummerSlam, and Solo's going to lose, and Roman Reigns is going to come out afterwards, being like, "Okay, now you're dealing with me."
I've got tickets.
Dude, you got tickets for Cleveland?
Mm-hmm.
Dude, that's going to be a really, and I'll be honest, I've got a sports show. I got Out of Pocket. I always trash Cleveland sports, especially since we got a few like Cleveland fans on Out of Pocket. Usually, Carson's been on Out of Pocket the last couple of days. He's a Packers guy, but he's a Cleveland Cavaliers fan. He's all over the map. Whatever, but I've always just ragged on Cleveland a little bit. But man, that SummerSlam is going to hit different. I'm excited for you.
I'm open. I've high expectations, and I think they're going to deliver. At the end of the night, I just hope the Tribal Chief returns.
Dude, that would be sick. Honestly, this SummerSlam, and we'll preview it more because SummerSlam is actually a week from this Saturday. It is that close. So we'll be doing a bigger SummerSlam prediction preview next week on Drop the Mic. But man, this SummerSlam kind of looks like SummerSlam 2002 is like the pinnacle of SummerSlams. If you go back and watch it, it stands the test of time. I personally love the SummerSlam 02 to 05 region for not only SummerSlam, but WrestleManias as well. But this SummerSlam has the potential to oversee SummerSlam 2002 with how WWE is on fire right now. So, dude, I'm excited for you. Do you think, you said you have high expectations. Is that where your bar is right now? Is 02?
If you look at what's already announced, Punk McIntyre, Rhea Liv, Gunther, Damian Priest, Cody Solo, I think it's going to be in the ballpark. I think it's not going to, if it misses the mark, it's a matter of inches.
Dude, it's I'm excited for you. So SummerSlam a week from this Saturday. We'll preview that more on Drop the Mic next week. This past Saturday, we had TNA Slammiversary, and if you guys didn't catch it, Sean did a phenomenal job recapping that on his Wrestling of Destiny emergency pod this past Monday morning. We didn't have quick hits that morning. We had some technical difficulties that made Saturday night super difficult with a nightcap. We do live post-show recaps on the Boom Broadcasting YouTube channel. So if you're watching this for the first time, that's why you should subscribe. Not only do we do wrestling, sports, so many other different content, but we also do like post-wrestling show nightcaps. And we'll do one again for tonight's Dynamite. But for Slammiversary this past weekend, we saw Nick Namath win the TNA World Title. I was rooting for Josh Alexander. I thought Joe Hendry was about to get it just because he is on another atmosphere when it comes to his popularity right now. But Nick Namath won it, and that got me thinking because Ethan Page recently won the NXT title. NXT and TNA have been having a partnership of some sorts, seeing a lot of crossover. but you have a former WWE guy who's now the TNA champion. You have a former TNA guy who's the NXT champion. Scott, would you be interested at all in a champion versus champion match? And if so, where do you even host it? Do you host it on TNA? Do you host it on NXT? Do you do both? What happens with that one?
I'd be 100% interested. I have been a backer of TNA for a very, very long time. When a lot of people had written them off and thought they were on the verge of Chapter 11, I was still pounding the drum for TNA. I think Nick, Dolph, however you want to refer to him as, was a great choice. You could argue Joe Hendry, but you could also argue, does Joe Hendry really need the title with how popular he is? Like, does being champion make him more over than how over he already is? Or do you go with somebody that has tried and has been so close on so many occasions and nobody gave him the opportunity to truly be the guy of a company? I think Nick was the correct selection to win the match. Now at Crossover, it's interesting because TNA just had a phenomenal turnout for Slammiversary, one of their best houses. Beautiful attendance. I think WWE kind of should give this one to TNA to do a crossover. You send Ethan down to TNA, presuming he is still champion whenever this match takes place, and you run NXT champion versus TNA champion in TNA and let them get the W this time. Because Jordan Grace did the honors to Roxanne in the last exchange. So I think it's only fitting.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Now, just so people are aware, we're closing in at the 3:00 hour on Drop the Mic. If you're watching us as we premiere this episode, I also hear we have like a small overrun because it was promised that we would talk about AEW. So bear with us. That's what you get at Boom Broadcasting is there's NXT overruns that they always do, or the AEW overruns they always do. And Rawls even asked for them with 3 hours. Like, come on, like just fill up your 3 hours. So yeah, it would be really cool. Especially like seeing Bobby Lashley and Drew McIntyre show they could be the guy in TNA as world champion. This is a great opportunity for Nick Namath. But yeah, AEW Blood and Guts is tonight. I wanted to touch on this, and you kind of previewed it earlier because we have a Blood and Guts match. Swerve Strickland, the AEW World Champion, Mark Briscoe, the Ring of Honor Champion, Darby Allin, and the Acclaimed are teaming up as Team AEW to face off the Elite, Kazuchika Okada, the Young Bucks, Jack Perry, and maybe for one night only, maybe Hangman Page. Not entirely sure what happens there. Dude, okay. We talked about like, hey, popcorn. We talked about hot shotting. And again, I want AEW to succeed, not bad mouthing AEW at all. But there was a time where WWE had the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view. And the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view became less, hey, this is a big, blow-off match for this rivalry that really needs it. Thinking Batista Triple H in 05, Edge Taker, SummerSlam 08. But now, like, Hell in a Cell's back to where, it was. But there was a long time. It was like, hey, October rolls around. We need a Hell in a Cell match. What's the feud of the month, right? And it feels like Blood and Guts this time is not necessarily a big blow-off feud. It's more of, hey, let's throw a Blood and Guts match here in the summer, and let's get this mosh posh of AEW guys to wrestle the Elite. Like, there's no story between Swerve and the Elite other than Hangman Page being inserted there. Mark Briscoe, there's not a story. Darby Allin, there's not much of a story other than his bout with the Young Bucks at Revolution Wrestling Sting. It's just, it doesn't make sense to me. Are you like, I'm excited for the match. Like, it'll be a good match. It always is with AEW, but are you like interested in the story behind it?
It depends on where we're going. there's an awful lot of champions on Team AEW for them to take a loss. But it is a War Games-esque match, and this is designed to benefit heels as well during this match. I'm going to take the Elite to win this match. I feel there is more mileage with the heels going over in this than the baby faces going over. Even though this does contain both the Ring of Honor and the AEW World Champions, and some other notable names in the Acclaimed and Darby Allin. But I feel you get more mileage further in the Elite storyline because that's the storyline. It's the Elite versus AEW. I guess to the point of the War Games match, WCW didn't always use War Games as a way to end feuds. Most notably, the biggest War Games to ever happen in 96, Team NWO versus Team WCW, that didn't end anything. If anything, that began that if Bash at the Beach was the inception of the NWO, then War Games was the true coming out party for the NWO. Because from that, you got the seeds to plant for Sting, which went on to be a massive success in WCW against the NWO. So I personally would not have an issue if this Blood and Guts match was used not as a final stop, but a checkpoint to the bigger story.
That's a great idea. I never thought about like, oh, we could get, because I was very critical about Okada versus Swerve first time ever happening on live TV, free TV yesterday on Dynamite 250 or last week rather. But if this could swerve, a little pun intended, to a Swerve versus Okada title program, a Swerve versus Jack Perry title program, and I'm sure we're getting the Acclaim versus Young Bucks. And hopefully we'll get Young Bucks FTR at All In this year. I'm super excited for their return. I never thought about that. If this isn't just a hot shot match, and if this is actually building to a story that we're like looking back in 6 months and we're like, whoa, this all started at Blood and Guts tonight. It's worth it. Scott sold me on Dynamite tonight. Let's go. It's going to be a fantastic night. But yeah, Scott, you're from Heated Shenanigans. Before we get out here, tell people where they can find you, my man.
Oh, I really appreciate it. Yes, Heated Shenanigans Podcast is available on YouTube. We are working towards our 2,000 subscriber goal. We have been very fortunate to be joined by some very, very impressive names. Eric Bischoff has been on the show, Kurt Angle, Mandy Sachs, Matt Cardona, Devon Dudley. Very grateful for all of their appearances with us. We also cover live streams of Raw and SmackDown, and we try to get all the pay-per-views that we can. Sometimes stuff comes up like we're at the pay-per-view, so we can't really do anything while we're there. But we also cover like predictions, we cover reviews and current events in professional wrestling. And we're also located on Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Podbean, respectively. So yeah, definitely check us out. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, dude. Super, super excited to get to have you on. Yeah, you're welcome on anytime. Love getting to collaborate with other wrestling content creators. And that's why we went the little 5-minute overrun, so to speak, which is totally fine. Hopefully we don't get fined by the EVPs, but they're more focused on their Blood and Guts match later tonight. But yeah, thank you, Scott, for stopping by. Thank you, Chris and Cliff from the When Giants Walked Here documentary for PBS, or stopping in earlier for that interview. It was fantastic. This has been a fantastic episode. Drop the mic. I've genuinely enjoyed it. But most of all, thank you guys. Oh, go ahead.
As have I. As have I. It's been good.
Oh, okay, good. That's good. I'm glad it's a mutual enjoyment right here. Maybe we'll book the second date, if you will. Yeah, let's go. I got a second date. But with that said, yeah, thank you guys for hopping on the show. Thank you guys for listening and staying with us for the whole hour. And everyone who supported what Boom Broadcasting has been doing this opening month. Wrestling content galore. I mean, you got your live streams with Heated Shenanigans. You can hop over for a nightcap as a post show after those on Boom Broadcasting. Mouthing Off with Mike does an incredible job with that. He'll be doing it for AEW Blood Guts tonight. Don't know who his guest is, but you'll have to find out more as you go in. But yeah, be sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, Boom Broadcasting. You can follow Drop the Mic on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all our things. But thank you guys for spending your Wednesday with us on Drop the Mic. We have to get out of here. Our overrun's over, but whatever you do, don't drop the mic, and we will be back next week with a SummerSlam preview.